welcome to another edition of The Invisible Hand on the Fireground. This is the 16th episode, and we're kind of like in summer mode. It's been kind of a busy summer. It's been flying by so far. I've been training diligently for this 2 bike rides that I'm doing. The first one is the Brotherhood Ride, which goes from Naples, Florida to the ground zero. And I'm riding to commemorate the firefighters that are dying now to cancer in 9/11. And then the second ride is the FDNY's 343 ride. And from there, we're going to go Montauk to Arlington, and that's for the Wounded Warriors. So this will be the first episode in about 2 weeks. And then maybe for the rest of the summer, we'll do 2 weeks and then back in September, hopefully back on track. So with me, I'm delighted to have Pat Kenny. I met Pat through a girl named Dina Ali, and Pat also is involved with FDIC. And anyway, I'll let Pat introduce himself. So Pat, do you like Pat or Patrick or?
Yeah, I like Pat.
Pat. So Pat, that's my middle name. So I have an affinity for it. Yep. So Pat, obviously, Pat Kenny, it's Irish. So I get a little bit of your background. So, welcome to the Invisible Hand on the Fireground. I don't really pull any punches on this show. I'm not afraid to talk about my faith and what I believe happens on the fireground. So why don't you just introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll get started.
Sure, great. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me on, and you've inspired me. As soon as we get off here, I'm jumping on my bike and going for a ride. I'm not anywhere near as far as your training, but God bless you and have a safe trip for all of you on both those rides. You're right. I grew up in a very Irish Catholic family. I believe I'm sitting here today because of my faith, and I'll try and briefly explain how that works. So both my parents born in Ireland, in a little town outside of Galway. They never met there, even though they lived about 15 miles apart from each other. Met at a dance in Chicago, got married, and had me. Now, Irish Catholic with an only child, that's kind of an oxymoron, but I probably was enough for them. And so I grew up in my house, was Irish enough that on the wall, there were 3 pictures that hung. There was a picture of John F. Kennedy, there was a picture of the Pope, and there was a picture of the original Mayor Daley. That'll tell you how old I am. And you pretty much, anything that those 3 said, you never said anything against. I never understood correctly why, but you didn't. So now if you're an Irish mom and you have an only child and it's a son, you obviously have aspirations that he's going to grow up to be a priest. So there was a tremendous amount of faith and I think just love for who you were and what you believed in as I was growing up. I got into getting ready to start high school and was in a really bad car accident the summer before I started. I was supposed to go play football and baseball in high school, hopefully, and had my legs shattered. Getting hit by a car. And that was the first time I think my faith was really challenged, because I had pretty much mapped out what I was going to do and where I was going to go. And it was destroyed in a second. I always pictured my dad being he would be sitting in the stands watching me play. And 5 months later, he got sick the day after Christmas, started throwing up blood clots. And on January 1st, he died of a massive stomach hemorrhage, which they figured out later was the result of having had cancer for probably quite a while. Again, old school Irish, didn't like the doctors, so didn't go. What I remember vividly about my dad, big, strong, strapping guy, big athlete in Ireland, was every night before he went to bed, he would get on his knees and pray. He always had a picture of the Blessed Virgin up in the wall in his room. I'll never forget that. As long there in his boxers and everything, saying a prayer before he went to sleep. And it really struck me. So now in the span of about 5 months, I've gone from figuring out that I'm going to be some professional athlete with all these girls and doing great. My dad will be in the stands, to now I can't walk and my dad is on the other side. So literally about a week after he passed, the bus that we took to the local high school went right by the cemetery. And I got off the bus. And barely at that point, I was walking now without crutches, but wasn't walking much in physical therapy, past maybe a quarter mile. It was probably a mile and a half to get into the cemetery. It's a cold, freezing, sunny day, and his grave was real easy to find because it was the only one that didn't have snow on it. So I went to that grave, Danny, and I sat down next to him. I put down my book bag and I went there to die. I was sure there was a heaven. I was sure that's where he was. I was sure my life was over and I had nothing. Hope was gone. Everything was just black. And anybody who's ever thought seriously about suicide, and it's considered a selfish act, which is, it really isn't, because when you're at that point and you're in so much pain, it's not a matter about who's around you and what's there. You don't think about it. I certainly didn't think about my mom, who was devastated at that point and what that would do to her. I didn't think of my friends or anybody else. All I thought about was I was in this horrific pain and I wanted to go. And I believed he was somewhere I could find him. And so I literally laid down and figured this is going to get cold enough and I'll die. And about a couple of minutes laying there, all of a sudden, I heard for the first time in my life my dad's voice, and it said, "Get up." And I remember thinking, I must be hallucinating. This is working. Pretty soon I'm going to be gone. And then I heard it again, except this time it was with the same tone of like when I didn't clean my room. It said to get up and get out of there. And I remember I sat up startled and looked over at his grave like, oh my God. And I grabbed my bag and got up, and it was everything I could to get out of that cemetery. No cell phones back then. You just made a phone call. I found a phone booth. My godmother was the only one who drove, and the family came and picked me up. I never told the story to anybody in my family about why I really went there that day. I just said I needed to go see my dad. I went through high school, kind of redefined. I obviously wasn't going to be a professional athlete. Wanted to be a teacher, a coach. I did that for about a year. And then my brother-in-law was a firefighter. Said, "Pat, you're a natural for this. You just love being around a team, and it's the best job in the world." And I started to take tests, and I didn't do very well. I thought, this is all political. It's who you know and what you know. And I finally took a test, and I walked into this gym that had over 300 people in it. Looked like every single man and woman in there had a fire department t-shirt, except the teacher, who walked in, of course, with a tie and a shirt, looking like a real dork, and sat down. I still remember the guy who was running the exam. I call him an older guy now, but he probably is my age. And he said, if you miss your name, you're out. So I'm sitting there on the edge of my seat. It gets to the K's, and I hear him say Kenny, but it's not mine. And then it goes on to Kowalski or whatever. I'm like, whoa, raise my hand and said, what? I said, "Sir, you didn't call my name." He said, "I haven't missed a name." I said, "Sir, you didn't call my name. What's your last name?" "Kenny." He said, "Yeah." He goes, "I called that." And I go, "No, sir, you didn't call Patrick Kenny." He goes, "Well, come on up here." So you can imagine you're standing out like a sore thumb, and you're walking up the middle. And I go up there, and he's looking at the middle envelope. He goes, "What's your full name?" I said, "Patrick Joseph Kenny." He said, "Where the hell did I get Michael from?" He hands me the manila envelope. He said, "All right, go ahead, sit down. You can take the test." Well, my dad's name was Michael. And when I sat down, I looked around that room and I went, you guys are all toast in this room, because I'm going to nail this test, because I'm not the one taking it. And I ended up getting the job. And there's no doubt in my mind, my dad was sitting next to me going, "This is your direction, kid. So I'm going to help you." And that was the first time that my faith, from a belief that there's something or somebody out there, had a physical connection to me. And some people they like to say these things are coincidences. I don't believe in coincidences. I really believe that everything happens for a reason. I don't have to like it. A lot of times a department that I went to, the first day I started there, their chief was leaving. So it was piggy move up. Chief retired, everybody moved up, new guy comes in. He came on the apparatus floor. He said, "What's your last name again?" He said, "Kenny." He said, "Do you know that we had a chief in the 1800s back here? Last name was Kenny." I said, "No, sir, I don't not even sure where the bathroom is here." And he said, "Someday you'll be the fire chief here." And walked away. And about 14 years later, I ended up being the fire chief there.
So
Pat, I get married, three kids.
Pat, what department was that?
Hinsdale Fire Department.
Okay.
In Hinsdale, Illinois.
Thank you. Okay. I wasn't sure what department you worked in. That's great.
Yeah. That's where I actually started at the Tri-State Fire Protection District. That was the one where my dad kind of sent me. And then after a year, moved on to Hinsdale. Tri-State had a very different schedule. It wasn't a 24-48. It was really hard on the family. And So I tested again and ended up in Hinsdale. So now I'm there, and I'm the chief, married Irish Catholic girl, real Irish Catholic girl, 13 brothers and sisters. Should have seen the first time I walked into a family gathering, and I go, okay, where are your brothers and sisters? She goes, over there. I go, yeah, no, I mean out of that crowd. Who are, she goes, all of them, 8 brothers. Talking about trying to jump through hoops, for crying out loud. So, and I hated being an only child, so it was great. I was so blessed to be part of the Madden family. So now I've got 3 boys. Brendan's the oldest, Patrick the middle, Sean the littlest. No Anthony's in there. All good Irish Catholic names. And life seems to be just going along great. And then our youngest son, Sean, was diagnosed when he was 5 with clinical depression. And I didn't even know you could have depression at that point. I knew you could be upset because you got grounded or you didn't get an extra scoop of ice cream, or I didn't get you that bike, but I didn't know you could be depressed. And he struggled through almost 15 years of his life. With everything from depression to finally being diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. And eventually he died by suicide. And what I want to tell you that's important about that, about the faith journey, was I learned so much from him about the truth about mental illness, that it's a physical illness. It's not a character deficiency. It's not a weakness. You don't choose it any more than you choose pancreatic cancer. These are chemicals in your body. He taught me about resiliency, but he also shared something with me that was the most powerful moment of my life, dealing with my faith. So he took an overdose trying to take his life when he was 18. We got a call from the local hospital that they had him. He'd been down. They didn't know how long. We went there, walked in, and it's that sight we've all seen, except it's not your kid. He's on a ventilator. He's ashen. He's aspirating around the tube. He's pretty much gone. And so we signed a DNR, we signed an organ donation, and we brought the family in to say goodbye. And after about 24 hours, the doctor came in and said, I want you to tear up the DNR. And we hadn't slept a wink. So I thought, did I hear what I thought? I said, why would I do that? He said, because he's fighting, he's trying to come back. So we got to give him a chance. So obviously ripped it up, and we spent 5 days going back and forth trying to take him off the ventilator, and it didn't work. Finally, on the last day, they said, if he doesn't come off the ventilator today and breathe on his own, he's going to be like this for the rest of his life, and you will have to find a place for him. And again, test of faith, long talk in the hallway between God and I, and it wasn't a very friendly one, and it certainly had a lot of F-bombs dropped in it, and I didn't care, because I'm like, this kid has suffered his entire life. His mother was a saint and did everything for him, and she is now going to have to find a place to take him like this. I prayed so hard. I'm like, please take him. I whispered in Sean's ear, you need to go, man. It's good. It's good on the other side. You'll be okay. This life's not for you. So that day was St. Patrick's Day. And in our house, obviously, as in most Irish Catholic houses, it was a huge holiday. And Sean loved that day. My kids were really all pretty crummy at math, but they all could pour a beer correctly from a keg. And he loved that day. And so I went in and decorated the ICU room. In fact, one nurse came in and said, what's all the decorations for? I'm like, seriously? It should be a national holiday. And I went to try and take him off the ventilator. And I went out in the hallway, scared to death. Like, this isn't going to work. And what am I going to do? How am I going to keep my wife from completely losing it? Where are we going to find a place for this kid? And all of a sudden I heard coughing. And I thought it's got to be one of the nurses. And then I heard it again. And I peeked around the corner like a scared little kid, this big, tough firefighter who couldn't stay in the room, but his wife, who had the courage of beyond, was in there along with my niece. And I looked in, and he was off the ventilator. And he was staring at me, a big smile on his face. And I had this hideous St. Patrick's Day tie on. And I said, are you laughing at my tie? And get this big, beautiful Sean smile on his face. And I started to sob. I ran in there. Everybody in the room was already crying. And they said, you need to go home. We got him back now. You got to go rest. So the next morning, phone rings from the hospital. I'm scared to pick it up. I fear he died during the night. He had a collapsed lung while he was in the coma. He had all sorts of issues. And this very raspy voice on the other end of the phone said, Dad, are you coming to see me today? I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? So we raced down there, and we get in the room. And this was when he shared the biggest gift I had ever been given. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he's very, very agitated. And I said, Sean, it's okay. I go, you got to rest, man. We got loads of time to talk now. It's all good. He's like, no. Saw Sean Kenny. And I said, no, no, no. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, he's got brain damage. I knew this was too good to be true. And my wife said, settle down. She goes, Sean, no, you're Sean Kenny. I said, no, no, no. Looks just like Dad, but younger. And she said, who looks just like Dad? Goes, Grandpa Mike. He then went on to describe my dad, not like any pictures he had seen. The only pictures he saw of my dad was in his mid-50s before he passed. Had gained a lot of weight, hair thinned out. He described this man in his mid-30s with the black curly hair that my dad had, with his athletic build from playing hurling in Ireland. And he said he had such big hands. And I remember as a little boy walking with him and thinking my dad's hand was the biggest thing I'd ever felt in my life, because it would just engulf mine. He said, and we sat on this concrete bench, and behind us were all these ads on the bench. Well, my mom and dad never had driver's license. We always rode the bus. When we rode the bus, we sat on concrete benches that had ads behind them to pay for the bench. Sean had never seen a picture of that. He never knew they even existed. They didn't even anymore at that point, and yet he described it in detail. And my wife said, did Grandpa Mike talk to you? He said, yeah. Tell Dan I'm sorry I had to leave him so soon. Now, you can talk about he'd done drugs, he would oxygen deprivation, they gave him stuff to keep him alive, and he's hallucinating. No 18-year-old kid would know what it was like to leave your kid behind. And yet the tears in his eyes, you could see the emotion. It was like my dad was talking right to me. And she said, did he say anything else to you? He said, yeah, tell Dan I'm really, really proud of him. And then he said, but Sean, you need to go back. It's not your time. Now, so for those of you who are listening who wonder, is there a heaven? I don't know if that's what it's called. Where's it at? I don't have a clue. Does it exist? I'm telling you it exists, because my kid was there and he came back. And all those years, Danny, that I had prayed so hard. I hope my dad can see this. I hope my dad can be a part of this. Wasn't at our wedding, wasn't for any of our kids being born, wasn't when I got sworn in, wasn't when I got promoted. I always wondered, did he see it? And I got the proof of what I needed through my boy and everything that he had suffered through. We fought again with the mental health, and he just got worse after that. And then eventually he died by suicide on the 3rd of June. And I know for a fact that he's okay too, because 10 years later, ironically, my wife came down with brain cancer. We always used to compare, when I went and did these talks around the country about mental illness, compared brain cancer to mental illness and said, you know, your brain is diseased and has cancer. Nobody thinks twice about it. You're a hero. But if you have mental illnesses, you're viewed as somebody who's weak. And my wife was diagnosed in January of 16. We had a son. Patrick was getting married in November. They told us from the very beginning they couldn't do surgery. They would just try to keep her alive for the wedding. She might be better by the wedding, but she wouldn't be with us much longer after that. So she fought like hell for 11 months. And by the time we're 13 days before the wedding, she can't use her entire left side. And yet her faith was so powerful. She's like, this is the way it's supposed to be. I don't understand why, but it's the way it's supposed to be. So our son and my daughter-in-law came 13 days before the wedding and had the most emotional conversation I had heard in my living room ever, and said, Mom, have you got 13 days left in you? And she said, I didn't fight this hard to not make it. So my brother-in-law, Terry, souped up her wheelchair, covered in green lights and shamrocks that glowed, and we were set to go. The next day, All Saints Day, November 1st, I went for a run. I was already home on leave. And I came back, and her girlfriend who was staying with her, who happened to be Sean's godmother, said, there's been a change. And I said, why didn't you call me? She said, no, she's fine. You just need to go in and talk to her. I went in the bedroom and I said, what's going on? And she said, not going to make the wedding. What are you talking about? We just talked about this last night. You told Pat you're going to be there. She's like, no, not going to be. Going to make my transformation. You can tell people. I said, what changed? She said, I saw Sean. I go, where did you see Sean? And she pointed to the end of the bed with this absolute determination. I said, how did he look? And she said, Pat, he was so happy. He looked so healthy. I said, did he talk to you? And she said, yeah. I said, Mom, I'm coming to get you. And 5 days later, she passed away. And she fought like hell during the night. It was the worst 12 hours, I think, of my life, even worse than with my son, watching her battle and trying to talk her into, hey, he's on the other side. She was a great athlete. I go, you are around third base. You're about to step on home plate and he's reaching for you. You just got to reach for him. He's right there. Couldn't go. All of a sudden, after 3 a.m., finally, she started to settle. And she died at 3:43 a.m. And when the hospice nurse said time of death, 3:43, I went, what time did you say? She said 3:43. She goes, does that mean something? I said, how many firefighters died on 9/11? And she looked at me and she went, oh my goodness. And I go, yeah. She needed to send me a sign that she was there and she was okay. I get it. And it lifted completely the pain that I was in at that moment to go, okay, thanks. That's why you always were the most determined of the two of us, and you weren't going to go until you were ready. But you picked a time that I know you were okay. So throughout my whole life, and I tried to make it as short as I could, but Irish Catholic can't do anything short. I've always had God in my background about even in the most pain I've been in. And if he's given me an angel and then taken that angel back, I've gotten some other angel that's come into my life and directed me or sent me signs that go, you're on the right path, or you might want to think about doing this. Doesn't always work. I don't have any special connection. I don't have a red phone, but I really believe that I had that all of those people over my shoulder who help me when I'm struggling and in trouble. And after all that in my life, as I said in the beginning, I wouldn't be sitting here now if I didn't have my faith. I'm not sure I'd be on this earth at all, to be honest with you.
Pat, wow. I'm trying to absorb everything that you just shared, and I definitely can identify with the just right back with you said the pictures, the Pope. I knew exactly where you're going with that, John Kennedy. And, it's funny. I believe in this kind of stuff. Just recently, my granddad just passed. It would be my grandfather's sister, the youngest sister, and she was very pious. She went to mass every day. She's actually, my mother told me that priests used to come to her to consult because she had survived so many cancers and whatnot. But the funny thing was, we knew that she was on her last days, and she said to my mother's cousin, she says, Sissy, do me a favor, would you bring the camera tomorrow? And she says, yeah, sure, Ma. What's up? She goes, yeah, I want to take a picture of the Blessed Mother. She's here.
Yeah.
So sure enough, she passed the next day. But I don't doubt it that the Blessed Mother was with her at that point. And the funny thing too, my grandmother, she was so matter of fact. She used to have arthritis. I lived with her. I kind of grew up with my grandmother, and Irish Catholic, the whole thing. New York, and so all those, very devoted to St. Jude, the whole Catholic thing,
Right.
And I remember once she had surgery on her knees, and anyway, she told me that when she was, she said it so matter of factly. So she said when she was in the operating room, that my great grandmother was with her, and they were talking and whatever, the whole time. So I have so many stories like that. I actually have a story, believe it or not. My cousin wrote a book about pretty much about the family, right, over in Ireland. And my grandmother told me this story when I was, I was only a kid. And she said that her cousin died, and it's in the book now, so it kind of validates the story. But she says that that my great grandparents were walking down the road in this small little town, and she said they heard the banshee, and the legend of the banshee, right?
Right.
And then she, in the book, he says a week later they got a letter from America saying that one of the sisters' sons had gotten killed in a bus accident up on the west side. So everything you said rings so true with me. I believe wholeheartedly, 100%. Everything that we just talked about. But Pat, as far as translating that over into the fire service, I mean, I had stories. I've been doing this for now 16th episode, and I've had firefighters come on and tell stories about near misses and stuff. Have you ever had this kind of relationship while you were in the fire service, how you were working?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, one in particular strikes me, and it really, I think it shaped my career all the way up into being a chief officer, was we had an activated fire alarm, basic thing in the morning, weekday morning. Actually, was the morning that my goddaughter was born, and about 7:30 in the morning, we went. It was a funeral home. I was probably 6 blocks from the station, and so we went, and no big deal. Thought, okay, it's just a fire alarm, and went in on the first floor, and there's nothing at all, and started to go to the lower level, and all of a sudden we smelled smoke, and we masked up and went, well, there's smoke everywhere here, but there's no heat. Couldn't find it. Came outside, and the parts of this funeral home, and this is an important part to paint, heavy timber construction. Parts of it were literally almost 100 years old. So we came out, went around the back. There was a stairwell that went down, and that was the casket room. And as soon as we breached the door, we were met with heavy smoke and fire. It was a really windy day that day. And we were able to look in real quick and could see there was an electrical panel, huge electrical panel in the corner, and it was lit up like a Christmas tree. So we started to pull lines, got ready to go ahead and hit this thing. And I'm a lieutenant at this point. So my mind is on, we're gonna get this thing. It's not gonna get this building, we're gonna get it. And we started off with 1 line, 2 lines, change a bottle, back down, same crew. No, we're not making any progress at all. Now, what I don't realize at the time is above me, it's now run the stairwell, and on the other side, the A side of the building, it is blown out through the windows and now looks like an inferno. In the back of the building, it doesn't look like much of anything at all, because the wind is blowing hard out of the west to the east and is driving that fire from the inside up and out. And there's no call or discussion about getting us out of the, it's a funeral home. There's no bodies in there. In fact, the crew went in, crawled in, and took some of the ashes that were stored at the funeral director and got all of those out of there. And yet we're going at it again and again and again. Finally, on the 3rd bottle, I came back out, and I heard a crew being sent to go to the 1st floor. And I'm thinking, oh my God, you can't be sending this crew to the 1st floor. And the way our system, we were a tiny little 1-station career department. And obviously when we had a working fire, there was a call back. We had to live within 5 miles of the jurisdiction. And 2 of our guys who had gone off duty in the morning were literally having breakfast in downtown and didn't have their pagers with. So all of a sudden, they're now watching this smoke go down the street, and they're like, wait a minute, this isn't good. And they come out and realize it's on fire, go to the station, get in another engine, get there. So they don't know what the time lapse is, and they don't know what the extent of this fire is at. All they know is when they get there, they're assigned by incident command to now take a line to the 1st floor. So they literally go above where we were for probably 45 minutes, making no progress. Again, heavy timber construction in that particular area of the building. So I hear on the radio what I think is them going to the 1st floor. And then all of a sudden I had this incredibly sick feeling in my stomach that was, you need to get them out of there. Very similar to my dad saying, you need to get up and get out of there. And I was like, can't be in the building. So I literally, by myself, violated all the work together as a company. I told my guy, stay here. I ran around to the back of the building, and here's this single line going up the stairs in on the 1st floor, absolutely above where the seat of the fire was still rolling. Crawl down the hallway. I'm yelling. Only time in my career I can honestly tell you I did this. I punched a hole in the drywall with my glove to see, okay, what have we got here? And I got nothing but flames, no smoke. The whole thing was lit up. And I'm screaming, where are you guys? Where are you guys? And they're like, we think we got it. Well, what they thought they got was it had burned a hole in the floor. And so they're watching this fire coming up, and they're going, there it is. We got it. As they're crawling over this inferno, well, to the point that one of those guys, we wore bunker pants back then and had knee pads on, ended up with his knees scorched based on the heat of crawling above it. I'm like, you got to get out of here. Get the hell out of here. No, I go, go. We're out. We're leaving. So it came out. The thing just rolled. It burned for another 14 or 15 hours, collapsed. We were out there with a ladder truck pouring water on it all night long just to try to knock it down. I violated every incident command rule. I never asked command to go for an evacuation. I just pulled them out. And as soon as we got outside, I went, called command, and I said, you need to call this defensive. We're done. We're not doing this anymore. Get everybody out of the building. Now, luckily, there was nobody else in at that point. So we're finished. And I listened to the radio traffic. I was not polite. I was not courteous. I was only a lieutenant for about a year, and I was way green on the job. I had maybe 7 years in, but I didn't care because I knew somebody's going to die in this building if you don't get everybody out. And there's no question in my mind, because that wasn't my mantra. I was pretty much follow your incident commander, that somebody told me you need to go get them. And they were two of my best friends. And to this day, when that anniversary date comes up, I always send a birthday thing to my goddaughter, and then I always send something to them and go, and you guys were at breakfast. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Somebody told me to go get them. And that one then drove me, as I became an incident commander, to never be afraid to pull people out if that little voice went off. It happened in one other a simple house fire, where I had guys in the basement making a knock on the fire. And all of a sudden, and we were making progress. All of a sudden, it got sick to my stomach and went, evacuate the building, evacuate the building. Everybody came out. People are pissed. You can relate to it, right? They're like, what are you talking about? We got this thing. I go, get out of the building. And we found out later the first floor had already started to go and would have come down on those guys if they stayed in. Those are the two that I'll always remember in my heart. Like, where did that come from? It wasn't from me. Somebody said it's not their day. You need to get them out of it.
Yeah, as an incident commander, I think that's probably the toughest decision that you have to make, because it's kind of unpopular. I remember one time working in Rescue 2, and we had a brownstone, and when you're in rescue, I guess you have this kind of different bravado, right? So
Sure.
we're on the second floor now, and somehow we wound up with the line, and we think we have a knock on it, and the chief is like imploring us now, like, get out, and the lieutenant is fighting with him, like, nope, we're not getting out.
Right.
And there's this back and forth, and then finally, of course, the chief won. And we come out, and of course the fire's out like every window. So there's always this different perspective, right, from the inside and
Right.
the outside. But that reminds me of a story, and I have to tell you now, Pat, because now I don't know if I'm repeating myself with the stories, but I remember this one particular, just like you were talking about. We had a vacant building, and we were a towel ladder, right? So towel ladder. New York City has probably one towel ladder per battalion. So we have 52 battalions. So we have probably a third of our ladder trucks are towel ladders, right? And we get this fire in an old 3-story frame. And it's this guy, Tommy Mahoney, who had just passed away. It was his last night, And, Tommy, we called him the Moon Man. And just a really quick, funny story about Tommy, right? You talk about, like, the other side and whatnot. There's something on the internet. You read up on it. If you find a dime, it's supposed to mean that someone's that died is passed is thinking of you, right? So
Right.
Anyway, his funeral is, I knew it was from 1 to 5, and I'm in service. His funeral home was very close to my firehouse, and I called my old firehouse and I said, what time's the wake? And they said, no, I knew it was 2 o'clock, and they said it was 1 o'clock. And I said, nah, I'm pretty sure it's 2 o'clock. So about 1:30, I take a drive up there, and I, sure enough, I walk in, and it's just the family. And I said, I'm early, right? And she said, yeah. And I said, oh, wow. She says, but you could go in if you want. I said, nah, I don't want to go in. It's the family, So I turned around and walk around, and there's a dime right in the vestibule. And I was like, okay, so that's the Moon Man saying hello. But but anyway, his last tour as a firefighter in 60 engine, right? We get this fire, and everyone is hard charges, right? They want to go racing, and this chief, he stands in front of the building. Is Chief Slevin. He was the acting deputy chief, and he said, we're not going in. And I have to tell you, that was a very unpopular, because this was the Moon Man's last night. He had spent his career in the war years in 60 engine, and this was going to be his, like, you're going to give him the nozzle, and that was going to be his, and the chief wanted nothing to do with it. So anyways, we set up the bucket. I'm up in the bucket with this other guy, and we're operating. We're knocking all the fire down, and I'm starting to work on the cornice. I'm pulling the cornice, and next thing you know, the building's gone, or whatever. And I said to the guy I'm with, I said, "Why'd you move the bucket?" He goes, "No, you nitwit." He says, "The building just collapsed." So, so we, of course, we all would have been in there, right? So, it's funny. Based on that experience, I had used that for myself when I had a fire, maybe about 3 years ago in a vacant building, and I knew the building was bad because I know the building, and just from the firehouse, I got on the radio and I said, look, battalion 3, I don't want any units in that building till I get there and get to check it out. And sure enough, the building was in disrepair. But I saw the chief at the Moon Man's funeral, and he loves that story. He always grabs me and says, "Hey, Danny, tell that story." So I always tell it because it's like it's his crowning moment on the job.
Sure.
He saved probably 15 guys' lives. So I asked him. I said, "Chief, man, I got to ask you." I said, "What prompted you to, because we always fought vacant buildings on the inside." And he says, "Danny," he says, "I drove past that building every day on 3rd Avenue, and I didn't like it. And, we had that fire that night, and that was it. My gut told me that, we're going defensive, like from the start." And, he was right. So, we go with our gut, and you talk
Right.
about coincidences. And I like to say that a coincidence is God's way of being anonymous. And I feel that all this stuff comes from him. Like, he's definitely, he's got our back, as you say. He's watching us.
Well, I'll tell you, it's fun. It made me smile when you talked about the dime story, because after Sean passed, we started to find dimes, and it was absolutely when it was the most difficult time, when something was going on, all of a sudden a dime would show up in places that were inexplicable. No, we didn't have any coins around, let alone there'd be dime, but they were always dimes. And I started to pass that story around to other people and said, really, actually, I put a number of those signs in the book. If you see a dime, I go, you got to figure they worked really, really hard to get that to you. It's not a penny, it's not a quarter, it's a dime. And in fact, the day before my wife went into her coma, I said, "Hey," he said, "So instead of sending me dimes, could you send me like $100 bills?" So I said, "I know it's a little upgrade, but I go, then I'll know for sure it's you." And she got this big smile. She goes, "I don't think that's happening." But I believe that also, that all those signs that are out there, this is probably hard to see at this point, but I have a little shamrock on my chain here. And this was, so my son, I'll make it real quick. So my son, Sean, used to wear shamrock earrings. And when he passed, my wife took one of the earrings off of him, and she said, "I'm going to wear this for the rest of my life." And she did. She always wore it, and used to drive some of her girlfriends crazy and go, "Your earrings don't match." It's like, "Yeah, I got a whole nother reason for this thing." So when she passed, I took the earring and had it made as part of this chain that I wear all the time to kind of help protect me and remind me that occurred. But the magic of these particular shamrocks was the fact that right after Sean passed, and we had at that point, the shamrock was on his lapel when the casket was closed, and my wife had the other one. She had a really good friend of ours who actually was an OB-GYN nurse who helped deliver 2 of our kids. Came down with lung cancer. Marathon runner, no real good reason. I mean, literally got sick a month after Sean passed. And on Christmas Day, she passed after this woman delivered all these babies. So very symbolic about your life goes on to a new life. And look at all these lives you brought into the world. But it used to really bother, Joanne was her name, that Eileen's earrings didn't match. So she tried to pierce them, give her another pierce, and she was too sick. It didn't work. So anyways, I'm at the firehouse the day of the wake, and I get a call. And Eileen is hysterical. And I go, "Slow down. What's going on?" And she said, "The earring, did you take the earring off Sean's coat? Why did you do that?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" I go, it's on his coat." I go, "We closed the lid." She goes, no, "It's here." And I went, hang on, I was only 15 minutes from home. So I got car, raced home, come in. Well, what happened is she decided for the funeral, she was going to wear a matching earring. So for the first time, she was going to take that shamrock earring off and not wear it. So she put it on the bed. She went and took a shower. She came back, started looking in her jewelry box. And in her jewelry box, she saw the shamrock. She goes, oh, okay, picks it up. She turns around and looks on the bed, and the shamrock's on the bed. Now, nobody in the house, me included, wore earrings except her. And she now had both of those earrings back. Now, explain to me, how did that earring get there? And it was the circle of, I really believe, her friend saying, hey, you match now, and guess who I'm standing next to? To this day, and that's why this is the most precious thing I own. There's no doubt in my mind that somehow he got that earring back to her that morning so she would be whole, and why she held it so close to her to wear those earrings forever. No logical explanation for that. There's none, other than he sent it back so that she'd have some hope. And powerful. I've got loads of them. I don't know how many pages of the book are parts of those signs that I really believe it, or people have shared with me. And it's funny because once you, that's a lot about your faith. People always say to me, and I'm not very religious. I go, I'm not talking about labeling, whether you're Baptist, Catholic, Protestant, you're atheist, I don't care what you call yourself. There's a higher power out there. And once you start sharing with other people that you believe, and some of the circumstances you've shared with me and I've shared with you, you watch the ripple effect grow. Because all of a sudden, oh yeah, don't tell anybody, but I got one of those too. I thought I was going crazy. And then they tell you the story and you go, are you kidding me? Like, how other way to explain that except somebody who has this great love on the other side is trying to let you know, I'm all good, man. Live your life, enjoy it. And someday we'll meet up again. I really believe that.
Yeah. You know what breaks my heart is that I got a clatter ring from my grandmother, right? And I always wear it on my ring finger on my right hand. Mm. And my fingers get swollen sometimes. So I'm going for a bike ride and I put it on my pinky, meaning to move it over to my other finger once I get to where I got to go. I was rushing and I get to the firehouse where we meet and I forgot to change it over. This is about 3 weeks ago. I have had this clatter ring since 1982 or 83. I got it when I was in Ireland and I wore it like every day. And so now I'm on my bike. I'm about 3 miles into the ride and I hear this ting, ting, and the kid I was with, Sean, he says, did you lose something? I'm like, no, I got everything. I'm looking at, I have my pump. So I got about another 2 miles and I'm like, oh my God. I checked my finger and my ring was gone. My clatter ring, my beloved clatter ring, man, that I had for almost 40 years now. And there's no happy ending to this right now. I haven't found it yet. And man, talk about praying. Like my grandmother was devoted to St. Jude. We got St. Anthony in the mix. We got everybody going. And I went back 3 times and, it's a bike trail that goes into among the woods,
Oh.
So I have a metal detector and I'm thinking at some point I will go back and try to scour it again. If I find it, I'll let you know. It will be a miracle. It'll be a miracle, but these things are precious. I get it. I know exactly what you're talking about, and so what's funny, my cousin's a priest and I posted it on Facebook because I was upset. I really was. And sure enough, we go down to the beach house for vacation. And he lives down that way. He comes over and I see the little ring box and I started crying. I knew exactly what it was. It was the exact same size. It was silver, but it was beautiful. And I mean, it'll never be grandma's ring, but I get it. I really get it. I get sad thinking about it right now. I get very emotional.
No, and it's funny, your timing is almost the same. So on this chain, I also always had a Celtic cross. Eileen gave me a Celtic cross after John passed because he had a Celtic cross tattoo on his calf. And 3 weeks ago, I was in Tennessee doing a class, and I was all dressed up, getting ready. I go in the bathroom, and all of a sudden, I'm like, God, I must have not cut that tag off that shirt. And I reach back, and I can feel it's my chain, and it's broke. And I'm like, oh my God. And so I immediately start peeling off my clothes, hoping everything fell inside. And there's nothing. There's no cross and there's no shamrock. And I go,
Jeez.
oh my God. And then I'm in the bathroom. And then I look down and and this is really tarnished. It was just a little glint that hit me from next to the urinal. I looked down and went, what's that? And I go down and I pick up the shamrock. I go, oh my God. I go, the cross got to be here somewhere. So nothing. I backtracked to the coffee shop. I mean, it wasn't a hotel, so they have the woods or anything. It should have been easy to see. And then I'm going, but I left the hotel to come here. And I walked, and then we were in a Uber, and called the Uber driver. I called everywhere, called the hotel. They put security on it, and I never found it. And I still haven't found it, and I don't think I will now. And part of me was like, I said, I'll as much as I miss it, I'm never going to replace it because I can't really replace it.
Yeah.
But there must be a reason why I don't need to wear it anymore. And my dad had a hurling medal that I always used to keep in my pocket for good luck. And in the month before Sean passed, he went in and was a pilot procedure. They were just trying something. They did literally put an implant in his chest to try and block some of the impulses that went to the brain. And it was a complete disaster. But Eileen took my dad's medal with her. And I said, just keep that with you and keep it near Sean. Well, I got to the hospital. It was an outpatient procedure after they did it. And I got there and she looked terrible. And I go, is he okay? And she's like, yeah, but it's worse. I go, what could be worse? She goes, I lost your dad's medal. And I went, what? She said, I lost the medal. And she's sobbing, right? As you can imagine how you'd feel about that. And she said, I looked everywhere. I can't find it. I traced every step from here into the hospital. I can't find it. And she looked at me and she goes, I cannot believe you're not furious. And I go, I don't need it anymore. And she said, what do you mean? And I go, that's why my dad came to see Sean. I don't need to carry a medal anymore. I go, I know where he is. I go, it's okay. So for some reason, this cross was supposed to go. For some reason, your claddagh ring was, and maybe it was to give a chance for your uncle to feel really good about giving you something special, caring about you and his connection with the other side. There's some reason for all of it. Like I said, a lot of times I don't understand it, and a lot of times it makes me angry. But I still believe that there's a reason for it. I always say the poor SOB who's standing behind me, if I'm lucky enough to get into heaven, is going to wait a while because I'm going to go, I ain't going in there until you answer a few questions.
I got it. Yes, I agree with you. Well, you know, it's a coincidence is my grandmother was Eileen and my sister's Eileen, that little girl in the picture.
Oh, really?
She's Eileen as well. So, Pat, I think we could, like typical Irish, we could probably talk all day.
We could go for a while.
But this has been a great experience talking to you. I mean, what a blessing to get to meet you. And I hope that we continue this friendship. And with that being said, I'm sorry for your losses too. I mean,
Thank you.
I lost my father when, geez, he was 46 when he died. That's him in that picture there, you know? And
Oh, wow.
I still miss him. And it's been since 1986, as long as I'm on the job. And talk about things happening for a reason. I was supposed to get on the fire department in March of 86. And for some reason, there was a clerical error or whatever. And they said, you know, Danny, you're not going in till the next class. And my dad was really sick. And I worked for a kind of an airline, FedEx. I had like these flying privileges, you know, and I was able to see him every weekend. And then he passed in April. And then I got on the job in August 2nd. So anyway, everything happens for a reason. Yeah. So Pat, I'm going to sign off. Great, again, talking to you. Another episode of The Invisible Hand on the Fireground. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks. God bless. Take care.